You already know more than you think. The problem isn't that you can't read people. The problem is that no one ever taught you how. Because every person leaves traces of who they really are. Not in their words, but in the cracks between them. Not in what they show you, but in what slips out when they think no one is watching. And that's where Nietzsche comes in. You know Nietzsche as the philosopher who declared God is dead, but what most people never realize is that he wasn't just a philosopher of ideas. He was a psychologist before psychology even had a name. He studied the human condition, not in laboratories, but in the messy, raw theater of life. And out of that, he gave us insights so sharp, they don't just cut through others, they cut through us. In this video, we're going to explore Nietzsche's 18 psychological truths, 18 ways of seeing through masks, of decoding behavior, of reading someone instantly, not tricks, not surface-level cues, but deep, structural insights into why humans do what they do. And I'll warn you now, once you see them, you can't unsee them. The world won't look the same. Your friends, your coworkers, your partner, even you'll start noticing things you never noticed before. A pause that reveals fear. A joke that hides resentment. A smile that's really a shield. But here's the key. This isn't about manipulation. Nietzsche didn't want you to see through people so you could control them. He wanted you to see through them so you'd stop being fooled. So you'd stop being trapped by illusions. So you'd finally connect with reality, theirs and your own, because here's the truth no one wants to admit. Most people don't even know themselves. They think they're acting out of choice, but really, they're acting out of habit, fear, and old wounds, their smiles, their anger, their confidence. All rehearsed performances, created long before they ever met you. They're not lying to you, they're lying to themselves. And that's why Nietzsche's truths are so powerful. Because when you learn to read the mask, when you learn to notice what people don't notice about themselves, you gain an ability that feels almost supernatural. You stop being confused by contradictions. You stop being surprised when someone disappoints you. You stop being blindsided by betrayals. Instead, you see the patterns forming before they play out. You see the story underneath the script. You see the human beneath the armor. But here's the catch. You can't just skim these truths. You can't skip ahead and expect to get the full picture. Because Nietzsche built his psychology layer by layer. Each truth deepens the last. Each one takes you closer to the core. So, here's how we'll do this. We'll go through all 18, step by step. And as we do, you'll start to feel something shift. You'll begin to notice that you don't just understand people more, you understand yourself. Because every truth we uncover about them is also a mirror showing you your own masks, your own fears, your own patterns. This video isn't just about reading anyone instantly. It's about learning to see, to finally see the world as it is, not as people pretend it to be. So stay with me. Take a breath. And prepare yourself. Because Nietzsche's first truth is about to change the way you look at every person you'll ever meet. Truth 1. Everyone wears a mask to survive. Nietzsche once wrote, "Every profound spirit needs a mask," but he didn't mean it as an insult. He meant it as a survival strategy. From childhood, we learn quickly that the world doesn't accept us as we are. Too loud, you get shamed. Too quiet, you get ignored. Too emotional, you get mocked. So, what do? We build a mask. We construct a version of ourselves that feels safer, a persona that's more acceptable, a character that will get us through the day. The kind one. She may not be kind at all. She may be terrified of rejection, so she overcompensates with sweetness. The strong one. He may be crumbling inside, desperate that no one notices. And here's the first key to reading people. Watch for tension. Masks slip under pressure. The fake laugh that lingers too long, the quick subject change when the topic cuts too deep, the discomfort in the eyes when the mask no longer fits. People don't reveal themselves in their polished words. They reveal themselves in the cracks. Truth 2. What someone hates in others reveals what they hide in themselves. Projection. Nietzsche believed this was one of the clearest windows into the unconscious. When someone constantly mocks arrogance, it's usually because they're insecure about their own worth. When someone obsesses over dishonesty in others, it's often because they're avoiding their own truth. We hate most in others what we secretly fear. In ourselves, think about it. Why would you notice arrogance unless arrogance was already part of your inner world? Why would dishonesty infuriate you unless you had battled it in yourself? So, here's how you read someone. Don't just listen to their compliments. Listen to their criticisms. What they point out in others is often what they cannot bear to admit about themselves. Projection isn't just an attack. It's a confession. Truth 3. Silence reveals more than speech. Words are social currency. But silence is truth. Nietzsche warned us not to mistake language for honesty. Words are often rehearsed. They're used to deflect, to impress, to fit in. But when someone pauses too long before answering, when they give short, prepackaged replies, when they dodge certain questions entirely, that silence is deafening. Ask someone about their childhood, and watch what they don't say. Ask about their fears, and notice how quickly they pivot. Silence doesn't hide the truth. Silence is the truth. It tells you exactly where the wand lives. Truth 4. Excessive virtue is disguised vanity. Beware. The person who never stops proclaiming their purity. The one who's always correcting others, always preaching, always showing you how good they are. Nietzsche called this the will to power in disguise, because real goodness doesn't need applause. Real kindness doesn't broadcast itself. When someone constantly virtue signals, when they need you to know how moral, pure, or selfless they are, it's rarely about morality. It's about superiority. They don't want to be good. They want to be better than you. So next time you see someone performing goodness, ask yourself, what are they hiding behind the sermon? Because the louder the proclamation, the deeper the shadow. Truth 5. People don't lie to you first. They lie to themselves. This one changes everything. When someone says, "I'm fine. I don't care. I'm over it," those aren't lies designed to fool you. They're lies designed to fool themselves. Nietzsche understood self-deception as defense, not as evil. Because to face the full truth about ourselves, our pain, our fear, our shame, that can feel unbearable. So people create stories that allow them to keep functioning, and when the story doesn't quite add up, when you notice inconsistencies in what they say and how they act, don't assume they're malicious. Realize they've been telling that same lie to themselves for years, and that's what makes them readable, because their lies leave fingerprints. And in those inconsistencies, you'll find the truth. Truth 6. Where someone feels superior, they're hiding inferiority. This is pure Nietzsche. He saw superiority not as a sign of strength, but as overcompensation. Think of the person who constantly reminds you of their accomplishments. The one who casually drops their status into every conversation. The one who needs to dominate the room. That's not confidence. That's fear. Because real confidence doesn't compete. It doesn't need to announce itself. It simply exists. But when someone needs to prove they're powerful, when they need to push others down to stand tall, what you're really seeing is a scared child in a crown, a child terrified of being overlooked. A child who has mistaken domination for love. So next time someone boasts too loudly, don't be intimidated. Look deeper, because superiority almost always hides inferiority. And here's the secret to all 6 truths so far. Reading people isn't about judging them. about seeing the child behind the armor, the fear behind the arrogance, the pain behind the mask. Nietzsche didn't hand us these insights so we could manipulate others. He gave them to us so we'd stop being blind. So we'd stop taking people at surface value. So we'd finally see that every human being is both actor and audience, mask and wound, performance and confession. And once you learn to see through that performance, something happens. You stop reacting. You stop getting tricked. You stop taking things personally. Because you realize that most of the time, it's not about you at all. It's about the war they're fighting with themselves. Truth 7. Most actions are driven by unconscious fear. Why do people over-explain? Why do they dominate conversations? Why do they disappear when things get too close? Fear of rejection, fear of abandonment, fear of failure, fear of humiliation. Nietzsche believed that most human actions don't spring from pure desire, but from fear of loss of status, loss of love, loss of self-worth. So if you really want to read someone, don't just ask what they're chasing, ask what they're afraid of losing. That's where the truth lies, because every person carries invisible guardrails built out of fear, and once you see them, their behavior suddenly makes sense. Truth 8. When someone criticizes too much, it's projection. We touched on projection before, but Nietzsche sharpened it further. Criticism is almost never about the other person. It's about the critic. Think of the man who mocks people for being too emotional. Why does it bother him so much? Because he's terrified of his own feelings. Think of the woman who belittles others for their looks. Why does she notice every flaw? Because she's at war with her reflection. This is the secret. Excessive criticism is always a mirror. The harsher the critique, the deeper the hidden wound. So when you hear someone tearing others apart, don't be distracted by the target. Trace the line back to the speaker. Because projection isn't just a defense mechanism. It's a confession. Truth 9. Guilt hides behind false confidence. We all know the type. The one who always seems in control, composed, certain, unshakable. But watch closely. Look at the clenched jaw. The over-preparation. The defensiveness when challenged. That's not peace. That's guilt. Dressed up as confidence. Nietzsche saw this everywhere. Leaders, preachers, teachers, the ones who performed certainty, because they were terrified of being exposed. When someone seems overly confident, don't assume strength. Ask what guilt they're trying to bury. Ask what truth they're afraid to admit. Because real confidence doesn't perform. It doesn't need to. Truth 10. People betray themselves through exaggeration. This one is subtle, but once you see it, you can't unsee it. Listen for exaggeration. It's the ego's way of drowning out doubt. The person who says, "I don't care what anyone thinks," almost always cares deeply. The one who insists, "I'm always happy," rarely is. Exaggeration is a neon sign pointing to insecurity. Nietzsche believed that extremism in any form wasn't strength, but imbalance. So when someone makes statements that sound absolute, don't take the words at face value. Read the insecurity underneath, because exaggeration is volume, and the louder it gets, the more desperate the silence underneath. Truth 11. Those who seek control fear inner chaos. Control. We crave it in our relationships, our work, our routines, but some crave it to the point of obsession, and Nietzsche saw why. When the inner world is chaotic, the outer world must be micromanaged. When someone cannot tolerate unpredictability, when they dominate others to feel powerful, when they panic at the slightest disruption, it isn't strength, it's fear. Fear that if they let go for even a second, it will all collapse. The stricter the outer shell, the more fragile the inner self. So next time you meet someone obsessed with control, don't mistake them for powerful. See them for what they are, terrified of their own inner storm. Truth 12. The louder the performance, the emptier the core. Look at social media. The endless posing, the curated identities, the constant need to be seen. Nietzsche would have seen it for what it is, not confidence, but desperation, because the louder the performance, the emptier the core. When someone constantly needs to be watched, when their entire life feels like a stage, they're not showing you strength, they're showing you fear, fear that without the show they'll disappear. The person who knows themselves deeply doesn't need to perform. They don't need applause. They don't need an audience. But the one who performs endlessly, they're telling you in every exaggerated gesture, I don't believe I'm enough unless you're watching. And here's the twist. Performance isn't power. It's a cry. A desperate hope that noise will substitute for connection. By now, you're starting to see it. The patterns, the cracks, the little betrayals that reveal the real person underneath. You walk into a room, and it's no longer just faces and words. It's a symphony of signals. The person who interrupts constantly. You see their fear of being forgotten. The one who boasts endlessly. You sense their invisible wound. The one who seeks control. You recognize their inner chaos. And here's the most important part. You don't just see them more clearly. You react differently because you realize it's not arrogance, it's insecurity. It's not cruelty, it's projection. It's not control, it's fear. And that changes everything. You stop taking things personally. You stop being shocked by human behavior. And instead of judging, you begin to understand. Nietzsche didn't want us to become manipulators. He wanted us to become seers, to see through the noise, to stop confusing the mask with the person, and to recognize that most people aren't hiding from you, they're hiding from themselves. Perfect. Let's keep going. This section dives deeper into pain, weakness, attention, envy, childhood, and hidden patterns, the most human truths Nietzsche saw. Truth 13. Pain speaks louder than words. When someone lashes out in anger, when they shut down, when they disappear without explanation, we often take it personally. But Nietzsche insisted, what you're really seeing is pain. Pain is the undercurrent beneath almost every reaction. The angry boss, he's carrying private wounds. The distant partner, she's protecting herself from old scars. The friend who avoids deep conversations, they've been burned before. Pain is the universal language, and the louder the reaction, the deeper the wound. So instead of asking, why are they treating me this way? Ask, what pain are they carrying that makes them act this way? Because if you read people through the lens of pain, the world begins to make sense. Truth 14. Weakness hides behind superiority. Think of the person who constantly needs to dominate the room, the one who can't stop reminding you of their accomplishments, the one who interrupts, corrects, or dismisses others. Nietzsche saw this for what it really is, weakness disguised as superiority. The need to feel above others always comes from the fear of being beneath them. Arrogance is armor. Superiority is a shield. And the stronger the display, the weaker the core. So, when you see someone desperately proving their worth, don't be fooled by the surface. See the trembling hands beneath the armor. Because superiority isn't power, it's insecurity dressed in expensive clothes. Truth 15. Attention is a drug. Why do people chase likes, applause, validation? Because attention is the modern drug. Nietzsche predicted this long before social media. He observed how people in his own time longed for recognition in their villages, their churches, their communities. He saw that humans will twist themselves into knots just to be noticed. And here's the catch, attention never lasts. The high always fades. So the person who constantly seeks attention isn't strong. They're addicted. They've confused visibility with value. And every time the spotlight dims, they collapse. If you want to read people clearly, look at how they handle being ignored. Because that moment, the silence after the applause, is when their real self emerges. Truth 16. Envy always reveals hidden admiration. This one cuts deep. Envy feels ugly. We don't like to admit it, but Nietzsche believed envy was one of the most honest emotions. Because you only envy what you secretly admire. The colleague who resents your promotion. They admire your drive. The friend who criticizes your relationship. They long for what you have. The stranger who sneers at your success. They wish it were theirs. Envy is just admiration, poisoned by comparison. So when someone envies you, don't just see hostility. See the backhanded compliment. And when you feel envy yourself, don't drown in shame. Use it as a compass, because envy points directly to what you truly desire. Truth 17. Childhood never leaves the room. We like to think we outgrow childhood, but Nietzsche believed otherwise. The child we once were is always standing just behind us, whispering into our choices. The man who grew up starved of affection spends his adult life chasing it. The woman who was never heard spends her adulthood demanding attention. The child who was shamed for failure becomes the perfectionist, adult terrified of mistakes. Childhood is never past tense. It's a script replaying itself in every interaction. So if you want to truly read someone, look for the child behind the adult, because until they confront it, their inner child is writing their story. Truth 18. Patterns don't lie, words lie. Masks deceive. But patterns, they don't lie. Nietzsche believed that the clearest window into someone's soul isn't what they say, but what they repeat. The friend who always ends up in toxic relationships, that's not bad luck, it's a pattern. The coworker who always feels victimized, that's not coincidence, it's a pattern. The person who always sabotages their own success, that's not fate, it's a pattern. And here's the crucial point. Patterns reveal the truth people refuse to admit. You don't need to guess who someone is. You don't even need them to tell you. Just watch what they repeat, because the story is always written in the cycle. And there you have it, 18 of Nietzsche's hardest truths about human nature. They aren't comfortable. They strip away illusions. But once you see them, you can't unsee them. The arrogant reveal their weakness. The critic reveals their wand. The angry reveal their pain. And every person, in one way or another, is carrying a hidden script. Nietzsche's challenge to us is simple. Stop taking people at face value. Look deeper. Because when you understand what drives others, you not only read them more clearly, you begin to understand yourself.